So there comes a moment in every man's life when something changes, silently yet irreversibly. It's not a loud moment. It's not a dramatic one. It's quiet, calm, almost serene. It's the moment when you, the man who once overthought every word, every text, every glance, suddenly stop caring. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but because something inside you shifts. You realize that the person in front of you no longer holds the power they once did. You're not chasing validation anymore. You're not proving your worth. You've finally understood what Jordan Peterson calls the alignment of being, when your emotions, values, and boundaries fall into harmony. That's the moment when she realizes you're no longer interested, and that realization hits differently, because it's not rejection she feels. It's the sudden awareness that she can no longer control your attention. You see, modern relationships often run on attention. Whoever controls it controls the dynamic. When a man gives endless validation, constant reassurance, or emotional energy, he unknowingly gives away his power. But when that same man steps back, when he learns to govern himself, to stand still in chaos, something incredible happens. He becomes unpredictable, mysterious, and in that stillness she feels the weight of your absence. This is not a game. It's transformation, a stoic shift in power, the silence that speaks louder than words. Women are intuitive. They feel subtle emotional shifts before words are ever spoken. She'll sense that your messages are shorter, not cold but detached. She'll notice that you no longer react the same way when she withholds affection or attention. She'll test boundaries she used to cross easily, and this time, you won't move. That's the silence of a man who's found peace within himself. Jordan Peterson often speaks about the necessity of order and chaos. He says that a man must balance both. Too much order and he becomes rigid, lifeless, predictable. Too much chaos and he loses himself in emotional storms. But when a man integrates both, he stands firm and still, calm in the face of anything. That's when he stops being a puppet of his emotions. She'll notice it. That calm energy, that stillness. It's not arrogance. It's mastery. It's not that you don't care about her anymore. It's that you care about yourself more. And that difference changes everything. You no longer argue. You no longer beg for understanding. You don't try to convince her of your worth because now you embody it. You've stopped explaining what kind of man you are, because real men don't announce. They demonstrate. And when you stop reacting, when your silence replaces your emotional outbursts, that's when the balance of power shifts entirely. She realizes she can't manipulate your emotions anymore. Her validation no longer fuels you. Your calmness becomes your greatest weapon. That silence, it echoes louder than any speech, because in it she sees a man who has become self-contained, a man who doesn't need her attention to feel significant. And nothing terrifies the modern world more than a man who's emotionally independent. This is the first stage of the Stoic shift. You stop chasing her and start mastering yourself, reclaiming your center, the Stoic power within. Jordan Peterson says, to stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open. That's not just physical posture. It's psychological. It means accepting that life is suffering, relationships will challenge you, and not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. But when you stand tall in that reality, when you stop fighting it, you reclaim your center. Every man has a core. That center is where your peace, purpose, and strength live. When you constantly chase validation, you abandon that center. You hand it away. But when you pull it back, when you stop explaining yourself, stop overreacting, stop overgiving, she begins to feel your energy change. You become less available but more valuable. Less emotional but more grounded. You stop trying to be liked and start being respected. This is the essence of Stoicism. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about mastering it. It's about recognizing that your peace is yours to protect, and no one, not even the woman you once desired, has the right to disrupt it. When she senses this new energy, confusion sets in. She wonders what changed. She replays old conversations in her mind, trying to find where she lost you. But she can't, because it wasn't one thing, it was everything. It was your internal shift. You started valuing yourself more. You started focusing on purpose, not persuasion. You began walking in silence instead of speaking in desperation. That's when she feels the loss, not of a man, but of the emotional control she once had. And that's when the Stoic shift is complete. You've become untouchable, not because you built walls, but because you built wisdom. This is what Jordan Peterson means when he says that the highest form of strength is responsibility for your emotions, your actions, your peace. You no longer need to dominate anyone. You simply exist in truth, and truth itself commands respect. You're no longer chasing. You're attracting. You're no longer waiting for her realization. You've already moved on to a higher state of being. The emotional detachment. The art of letting go without losing compassion. There's a difference between letting go and turning cold. Jordan Peterson often reminds us that strength without compassion becomes tyranny, and compassion without strength becomes weakness. When you detach emotionally, the goal is not to stop feeling. The goal is to stop suffering from those feelings. You see, emotional detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means clarity. It means you've reached a level of awareness where your emotions no longer dictate your behavior. You can love someone deeply, and yet still walk away when that love starts destroying your peace. You can care but not chase. You can wish them well but not wait for them. That's emotional maturity. Most men confuse attachment with connection. They think love means holding on no matter what. But Peterson teaches that life demands discernment. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself. When she realizes you're no longer reacting to her games, not checking your phone every hour, not begging for attention, that's when she begins to feel the vacuum your absence creates. That's when she understands the power of detachment. Your calmness becomes uncomfortable to her, because it's not something she can control. It's not anger. It's peace. And peace is power. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop defending your worth, you communicate the loudest message possible. I don't need you to see my value. I know it already. That's not arrogance. That's awareness. And in that awareness lies liberation. You free yourself from the constant need for validation. From the endless emotional roller coaster. You stop trying to fix things that were never your responsibility. Jordan Peterson says, "You're not responsible for someone else's chaos. You can offer guidance. You can show compassion, but you cannot save someone who refuses to take responsibility for their own life." When you internalize this truth, your entire energy changes. You stop being reactive. You stop begging for closure. You stop giving pieces of yourself away in exchange for temporary comfort. And that's when she realizes something profound. She didn't lose a boy desperate for attention. She lost a man who found his peace, reclaiming purpose, turning pain into power once. The emotional fog clears, something remarkable begins to happen. You rediscover purpose. Peterson says that meaning is what saves us from chaos, not pleasure, not comfort, meaning. Pain becomes the foundation for growth. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every rejection becomes raw material for transformation. You start to see that she wasn't the lesson, the experience was. You realize that her absence created the space you needed to rebuild yourself, to focus on your goals, to refine your discipline, to strengthen your character. Pain, when directed properly, becomes fuel. It's energy, untamed, yes, but powerful. When you stop wasting it on self-pity and start investing it in purpose, it transforms into fire. You channel it into your career, your health, your art, your mission. Jordan Peterson emphasizes the importance of carrying responsibility willingly. He says, "You must pick up the heaviest thing you can carry and bear it." And that's exactly what you do when you use heartbreak as a catalyst for evolution. Instead of asking, "Why did she leave?" you start asking, "What can I build now?" That single shift in mindset changes everything. You stop existing as a reaction to her choices and start living as an expression of your purpose. You stop orbiting her world and start becoming the center of your own. When she eventually looks back, and she will, she won't just see the man she once knew. She'll see a completely different version of you, one who no longer needs her to feel whole, one who has found fulfillment in purpose, not approval. This is the Stoic evolution, transforming pain into precision, heartbreak into hunger, loss into leadership. You become grounded, unshaken. You've faced emotional chaos and turned it into wisdom. And that, my friend, is what true masculine energy feels like. Quiet, steady, unbreakable. The return of the Stoic man, silent, strong, and unapologetic. When you reclaim your purpose and detach from emotional dependence, something ancient reawakens within you. The Stoic man. A man who walks alone but never feels lonely. A man who gives without losing himself. A man who can love deeply, yet still walk away peacefully. Peterson often says that strength is not the absence of emotion, but the discipline to control it. That's what you've become, a man who feels deeply but acts wisely. The Stoic man is calm, not because life is easy, but because he's made peace with difficulty. He doesn't seek control over others. He seeks mastery over himself. He doesn't manipulate or chase validation. He embodies presence. When you speak less, your words begin to matter. When you appear less, your presence begins to echo. When you withdraw your energy from those who take it for granted, your aura changes. People can feel it. That's the paradox of power. When you stop trying to control outcomes, everything starts aligning naturally. Because power is never taken, it's recognized. And when she looks at you now, she feels that shift. You're not angry, you're not cold, you're complete. You've stopped needing her to understand, to validate, or to change, because you've changed yourself. This calmness confuses her because she's used to men begging, arguing, proving. But you've evolved beyond that. You've entered a state of quiet dominance, where your boundaries speak for you, where your actions define you, where your peace intimidates more than your words ever could. That's the return of the Stoic man. Strong, still, self-aware. A man who walks through life with purpose, not panic. Who treats emotion as information, not instruction. Who no longer looks for control outside because he's mastered it inside. Jordan Peterson once said, "If you fulfill your obligations every day, you don't need to worry about the future." That's the ultimate Stoic principle. Live with discipline. Think with clarity, act with purpose. Now, you don't wait for her to realize what she lost. You've already realized what you've gained, yourself. And that realization is the true shift in power, the rebirth of identity. Becoming who you were always meant to be. When you stop chasing people and start chasing purpose, your identity begins to rebuild itself from the ground up. It's like shedding an old skin. Every layer of insecurity, every trace of emotional dependency, every belief that your worth depended on someone else's attention, it all falls away. Jordan Peterson teaches that transformation begins with truth. He says, "You cannot lie to yourself without bringing hell into your life." And for years, many men lie to themselves, pretending they're okay being treated as an option, pretending that overgiving is strength, pretending that endless patience will earn love. But when you finally face the truth, that you were giving more than you received, that you were betraying yourself to keep someone else comfortable, something snaps. That's the moment of rebirth. You start seeing yourself differently. You start dressing with intention. You walk slower but with direction. You speak less but every word carries weight. The man who once needed validation now radiates presence. The one who begged for understanding now commands respect through silence. This is what Jordan Peterson refers to as voluntary confrontation. You confronted your own weaknesses, your emotional chaos, your fears, and you didn't run. You looked into the mirror of your pain, and instead of breaking, you rebuilt. You realized that your peace is your power, your self-respect is your weapon, and your solitude is not emptiness, it's refinement. Now, when she looks at you, she sees the difference. She senses it in your voice, your demeanor, your energy. You're no longer the man who reacts. You're the man who observes. You no longer chase what's fleeting. You build what's eternal. You've become aligned with your highest potential. That's not ego, it's evolution. That's not detachment, it's divine clarity. Because now you understand something profound. The person you lost wasn't your destiny. They were your lesson. And through that lesson you found your direction. That's the rebirth of identity. The creation of a man who no longer defines himself by relationships, but by principles. A man who doesn't seek comfort in attention, but in purpose. A man who has walked through emotional chaos and returned with wisdom in his hands. The power of stillness. When calmness becomes command, there's a power in stillness that very few understand. It's not passive. It's not weak. It's deliberate. It's awareness in motion. Jordan Peterson says that the world is chaotic, and the man who can remain calm in chaos becomes the pillar others lean on. That's what Stoicism trains you to be. Not emotionless, but emotionally intelligent. To understand that your reaction determines your reality. When you become still, you gain control. Not over others, but over yourself. You no longer waste energy trying to prove who you are. You simply are. She'll test your silence. She'll wonder if it's real, or if you're pretending. She'll wait for a reaction that never comes. And that's when the power dynamic fully reverses. Because now your calmness commands more attention than your words ever did. Your stillness becomes magnetic. People can feel the difference between a man who's pretending not to care and a man who's genuinely at peace. And here's the truth. Peace is rare. That's why it's so powerful. Most people live in constant noise, distraction, reaction. But when you reach stillness, you operate on a higher frequency. You become unshakable. You stop needing to prove your worth to anyone. You don't chase validation because your presence validates itself. You don't engage in emotional battles because your silence ends them before they begin. Stillness becomes your dominance. It's the invisible force that commands respect. And in that stillness, she finally understands. She didn't lose your attention. She lost her influence. Because now you've transcended the game entirely. You've become the man who no longer needs to win. Because he's no longer playing. The final Stoic shift at the end of all this, you realize it was never about her. It was about you. It was about reclaiming your energy, your focus, your self-respect. It was about stepping out of emotional chaos and into masculine clarity. Jordan Peterson says, if you want to change the world, you start by cleaning your room. That's not just about tidiness, it's about order. It's about taking responsibility for yourself before you demand it from anyone else. When you cleaned your emotional room, you discovered peace. When you stopped chasing, you found direction. When you stopped overgiving, you found balance. And when you stopped waiting for her to value you, you finally valued yourself. Now you walk through life differently. You're not desperate for validation. You're not consumed by rejection. You're free, and that's the final Stoic shift. The moment a man stops seeking power and becomes power, she'll realize it eventually. She'll notice the absence of your old energy, your old habits, your old need for her approval. She'll feel the void left behind by the man who used to give endlessly. And in that realization, she'll understand what she lost. Not a lover, but a leader. But you won't be there waiting. Because you've outgrown the version of yourself that needed her to see your worth. You've stepped into a new dimension of strength. Quiet, focused, purpose-driven. That's what it means to embody the Stoic shift in power. It's not about revenge, not about ego, it's about elevation. You've become the calm in a world addicted to chaos. You've become the man who doesn't react because he's rooted. You've become the example of what every man can be when he stops chasing the world and starts mastering himself. And in that quiet mastery, everything changes. You no longer chase love, you attract it. You no longer seek peace, you are peace. You no longer need to be understood, you've finally understood yourself. That's the moment she realizes you're no longer interested. And that's the moment you realize you never needed her interest to begin with. Because the real power was never in her recognition. It was in your transformation. That's the Stoic shift. That's the rebirth of the man within. That's the moment the world finally sees who you've become, and you no longer need to explain it.